You've been treated for depression. Is that right?
Yes.
And who's the current doctor?
Dr. Said,
And the last time you saw him?
2 days ago. About 8:10.
Your house waited at that time.
My husband, Mary, Luke, and Paul.
Okay. The rest for work.
He left about 9.
And by the time the rest of you left for all your children awake at that time?
Yes.
Yeah. What was going on in the house?
Yes. Yes. Cereal?
As well.
Yes.
Left. Did you fill a bathtub with water? Is that correct?
Yes.
Bathtubs are in your home.
1.
So I guess you would call it.
Yes. Regular size.
How far you fill it?
About 3 inches from the top.
What were you about to do?
Drown the children.
Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome back to Venting with Us, another week down. I can't believe we're almost done with January. It's kind of crazy. But the clip that you just saw was a clip conducted by the police in Texas for Andrea Yates, who we're going to actually speak about today. If you would like to watch the documentary on this, the ID channel just released a 3-part series of Andrea Yates and the crime that she committed, along with more to the story that nobody knew about, which happens on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of people in their house homes don't realize that this is what brainwashing is. So we're going to get down to first of what happened. Andrea Yates was a woman from Houston, Texas, who confessed to drowning her 5 children in their bathtub on June 20th, 2001. The case of Andrea Yates, who had exhibited severe postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and schizophrenia leading up to the murders. At Yates's trial in 2002, Chuck Rosendale, the district attorney for Harris County, asked for the death penalty. Yates was convicted of capital murder, but the jury refused the death penalty. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. The verdict then took a turn and was overturned on appeals in light of the false testimony by the prosecution witness, which this part is very important because the forensic psychiatrist, Park Dietz, had stated on trial and committed actually perjury on trial that Andrea went into a psychosis mental state due to a Law and Order episode where the killer had drowned their child in a bathtub. It was proven later down the road that this episode of Law and Order had never actually happened, and that's why they had overturned the murder trial for Andrea Yates. On July 26, 2006, the Texas jury in her retrial found that Andrea Yates was not guilty by reason of insanity. She was then committed by the court to a high security in North Texas State Hospital in Vernon, but then later moved to a low security hospital in Kerrville, Texas. Let's speak about Andrea. Let's rewind this a little bit to actually understand what happened who Andrea Yates was and what led up to the murders. Because this part, we all know the story, though some of us don't know the story, which I think this is why we need to speak about these situations, these things that happened in the past, because history has a way of finding itself back. But let's deep dive into Andrea Yates and who she was and what led up to the murders. So, Andrea Yates was a woman from Texas. She worked as a nurse, believe it or not, from 1989 until 1994 at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. In the summer of 1989, she met her then husband, Rusty Yates, who was an actual NASA engineer. And to this day, he still works for NASA at the Sunscape apartment in Houston. They had fell in love and believed that they would just be together forever. They felt like they were soulmates. Rusty had fallen so deeply in love with Andrea, he couldn't see anybody else in his life. They soon moved in together and were married on April 17th, 1993. Yates and her husband were a devoted Christian couple and wanted to have as many babies as they possibly could. Yates weren't religious, but believed in God, believed in the Bible. And during this time, they had met someone called Michael Wernicke. Now, this is the part where it gets very tricky because Michael Wernicke is a non-denominational Christian who had been in communication with Andrea this whole entire time. And what Michael believed was that God was going to come back, which we still all believe this to this day, that God will return. He's going to tell us exactly what we've done in our life and, what the good and the bad things in our life. And he preaches on this. The problem with Michael Wernicke is that he does not follow through on everything that is godlike. And this is where a lot of people can fall into cult-like behavior, is what I like to say. Now, cults, a lot of people have this vision that cults are within a compound, that's, they're a part of a church. Now, here are the signs of being a part of a cult. Okay. And this is super important because Rusty had introduced Michael Wernicke to Andrea. He had specifically said in the documentary, again, this is on the ID channel, there's a 3-part series to it, that he liked Wernicke because it wasn't Bible verse, sit down up in church. It was more of a little bit, understanding, some of the passages. But when it led up to marriage and him isolating himself from the marriage, beating his wife, he didn't feel that that was godlike, which it's not. And any cult leader, you'll always hear in every cult story, which is what I should say, is that they want you to be separated from the outside world. They only want you to associate within the group, because the outside world is the devil and the inside group is what's holy. You're supposed to give yourself to God. You're supposed to live in a way where suffering is more of an approval. We all know, regardless of what religion you're in, that's not how God or I, I don't know all of, like, the Jehovah, well, I don't know all of the godly, but whatever you believe in, basically, they don't believe in that. They do believe that you are to have prayer, regardless of the religion. You do unto others as you would want to do unto you. Um, you're just kind to people. You help people. No matter what the message is always the same, no matter how you would like to be explicit towards it. And Michael Warnecki does not believe in that. He believes that a man is to dominate and to push. The woman is the provider and to have all the sacrifices, and that's how you get into heaven. That is cult-like behavior. Again, if you are to another sign of being an almost kind of, I wouldn't say cults, but is not godly, is when someone says, oh, well, we can't help you unless you're associated with this committee. If you're part of this congregational, that is not godlike. God, remember, in the end, God did not care about religion, even though some people do believe that. But he did not care for religion. He cared about his people. And yes, if God comes back, as they say, or the Messiah, or again, Jehovah, whatever it is you believe in, it's all about how you were and how you treated people. Because at the end of the day, if you do not treat people, we are all God's child. If you do not treat people with kindness and care, that's more of the judgment. But God wants us to be happy. He wants us to live a lavish life. I'm not saying, and when I use that word, I use it with endearment because I think people have that mindset that lavish means rich and living in a mansion. No, lavish means being, having the fruit in your life, being humble, being graceful, helping someone else. That's what I mean by that. Following the birth of Andrea's third child, Luke, Yates had started to have depression, and she had shown signs with her first and her second child, but it wasn't up until the third child where the depression actually resurfaced. On June 16th, 1999, Rusty actually found Andrea Yates shaking and chewing her fingers. The next day, she attempted not one, but 2 suicide attempts by overdosing on pills, leading up to her being hospitalized and prescribed by antidepressants. Soon after, Yates begged Rusty to let her die as she held a knife up to her neck in her mother's bathroom. Rusty had thought that moving into the parents' house would help out with the depression, help out with feeding the kids, and not so much on Andrea. There is one thing that I do have to say, that Rusty in the interview had said he had never known about depression and especially postpartum depression, and that he wished that he would have been more educated and had more knowledge of what a woman actually goes through and what postpartum the symptoms are. If he would have known that, he could have done something differently, or he wished he would have known what would have led up to it. But he didn't. Again, this was a time where, mental illness was not discussed. It was not a big thing. We knew about it, but we didn't know about it, if that makes sense. Once again, after that, Andrea Yates was hospitalized and was given Hadol, which is an antipsychotic drug. Yates' condition improved immediately, and it was determined that she was having postpartum depression. In the year of 1999, Yates then again had a nervous breakdown, which culminated in 2 suicide attempts and 2 psychiatric hospitalizations and within that summer. It was taking so much of a toll on Andrea. During this time, she was having communication with Warnecki. He was sending her letters, which Rusty does confess in the episode that he didn't mind that Yates, Andrea was communicating with Michael and the family. He had by that point had separated himself from Michael because he wasn't really agreeing with Wernicke and his beliefs. And during that time, Rusty had found letters of mentions: you are to succumb to death. You are to give your soul up to God. And this is now brainwashing. This is what's considered brainwashing. And this now leads down to cult-like behavior. He is not in a church. He is not really giving out verses in the Bible. You are using words from the Bible, but you are translating them into how you feel that someone should react, allegedly. Yates' first psychiatric doctor, Eileen Starbranch, testified at Andrea Yates's trial that she had urged her and Rusty not to have any more children, as it would guarantee future psychotic depression. But by the March of 2000, the Yates family had their 5th child, Mary, and their final child, unfortunately. Approximately 7 weeks after giving birth to Mary and she was discharged from the hospital, Yates at this point had decided to stop taking all of her medication and to really focus on being a good mother, and seemed to be coping well. But then, unfortunately, what ended up happening was being off the medication, listening to Warnecke, saying that him telling her that this is all demon, that this is the devil going into her head, being so brainwashed. By May 3rd of 2001, she degenerated back into a catatonic state. And that morning, Rusty said that he had had this really bad feeling. There was something just not right with the way that morning went. He had found Andrea in the kitchen eating dry cereal out of the box, just putting her hand in the box, eating the cereal in a very catatonic way. He went into the kids' bedroom, kissed them goodbye, went off to work, and sometime within the afternoon, Andrea took a turn for the worst. She filled the bathtub up with water and she drowned all 5 of her children. She then called the police and told them that she needed a police officer. She needed someone to come because she was there with her kids. She doesn't go into detail. You can actually hear the phone call. She then called her husband, Rusty, and asked him to come home. And he had said in the interview that he felt this feeling that something's not right here and that he needed to come home. So as he started to go home, he, unbeknownst to him, had stumbled upon what seemed like a dozen amount of police officers. The news was all over the front yard and the streets, covering the case already. And he couldn't understand what was happening at the time, but he knew that something was not good. And he soon was informed that his children had died and Andrea had murdered all 5 of their babies. What I appreciate of Rusty is that during this time, he was really, really fighting for his wife, where most people would be like, you know what? I can't believe she did this. Everybody hated her at this time. But they did not understand that being brainwashed by somebody who is really participating, even to this day, in cult like behavior, telling someone that when they have kids, you need to beat your child till the devil comes out of them is terrible. We're in a time now where we can actually see where cult life happens. During that time, it was, the letters in the mail, um, living in a certain way where you were financing their life. What I did love about the documentary is that you do hear other people's stories, where Michael Warnecki also had tried to brainwash other people and tell them, you shouldn't be in a relationship, because being in a relationship is going to not allow you to have the connection with God and be there for God. And you really need to focus on the message. And this is what cult like behavior is like. They want to take away, they want to isolate. Again, it's all about isolation. Because once you're devoted to that one person, that then you feel like, that person, whatever they say, whatever they do, is actually correct. It's kind of like looking up to, I'll give you a perfect example. Um, your famous singer or your famous actor, and you really, really love them, and you love everything that they do. And if they say, okay, well, this food is good, kind of like, like, oh, if they're selling a product, you're going to believe that that product is good. But in this situation, it's more of spiritual, it's more within the church. And people tend to be more sucked into these cult like behaviors because God is the Almighty. Again, even what it doesn't matter what religion you're in. When someone is practicing different scriptures and they're using the scriptures up to what they feel, that can start the brainwashing. And he would send Andrea, different tapes. Again, in the documentary, you can hear a lot of the recordings. You can hear about sacrifices and what you should be doing with your children, what type of sacrifices you should be doing for yourself. A lot of these members that were worshiping Wernicke were actually supporting his lifestyle. He would call them and ask them for money, so that way they can travel someplace. And if they didn't give it to him, they were considered a part of not being a part of God, a part of the religion, a part of um doing a lot of the sacrifices. That again is brainwashing to its finest, and it's cult like behavior. So we can't have those, again, these are things that I would encourage people to look out for, and it starts off so small, because you start going to a church, or you start going to some place where you feel, okay, these are my people. And it's very small little things that catch your eye, and you kind of dismiss, kind of like red flags, and we dismiss them. because we're like, every place has their little thing. Okay, boom, we put it in the closet. We don't worry about it. And then we see another little thing. And before you know, you have all of these red flags, but you're so deep into it that you don't know if you're coming or going at this point. And a lot of people, what it leads to is suicide, um, the Andrea Yates story, killing her babies, going into such a psychosis type of form. And I always say, you have to remember that these are not godlike things that, that we're supposed to be doing. And to this day, Michael Warnecki, he's still preaching and still going into other people's congregation. He's going to the streets. He's going to a lot of colleges, and preaching these things. And Lord knows how many people are part of this cult. He does explicitly say, in the interview in the ID channel, that the Andrea Yates should not be blaming him, or he should not be blamed for the Andrea Yates situation, because that's not what he was preaching. And if she would have followed and been disciplined to his teachings, that would have never had happened. But if you would have seen a lot of the messages that he was sending her, it led up to those things. And that's where it becomes very, very illusional, very shaky, because that's what they don't understand. That's what they don't see. People that are not a part of it, don't understand it. It's kind of like, I've never been addicted to drugs. So I don't understand how is it you can get addicted to drugs. And I think that's exactly how Rusty, Andrea's husband, felt. A lot of people were asking him, like, how is it you didn't see that this was cult-like behavior? He's like, well, I don't see it as cult-like behavior. But I don't see it as cult-like behavior because I wasn't as deep into it as Andrea was. And that's where I can actually sympathize with him. He didn't want any part of it, but he could not understand how she became so brainwashed and actually seeing all of those things. And to this day, he still says, I don't really think it's cult like. I truly believe that this is a person who was very sick, which by all means, he's absolutely right. She was very mentally sick. She had all of these problems, but I think if he would have, and he says in the documentary, he's like, but if I would have known to the extent of what was happening with Warnecki, I would have never introduced Andrea to him. I would have never allowed all of these things to happen, along with knowing and having the knowledge of postpartum depression. He figured that, okay, when she went to the hospital after the third baby and they gave her the medication, that, okay, look, if we have another child, because that's what they believed in, that's what they had always said, that, they were going to have as many kids as possible, that the medication would work again and then she would be fine. That was his mentality. That's what he felt in his heart, that, okay, this is going to be okay. We'll get over this hump like we did before. But unfortunately, that was not the case. So I always encourage people that if someone is going through something, if someone is isolating themselves, these are signs of someone who faces depression. Schizophrenia is becoming a more now known thing in the world. And if there's someone that that is suicidal, that is having mental issues, that is depressed, I encourage you to definitely seek help for that person. So that way there's not another Andrea Yates story. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Again, if you would like to see the Andrea Yates documentary, it is on the ID channel. It's a 3-part documentary series. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Stay blessed. Stay within yourself, and all good things happen. And remember, anything negative that you put out there will definitely come back in. Stay positive, stay bright. Don't let others discourage you on your path. Because at the end of the day, whatever religion that you are in, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, if you're a Christian, if you're Baptist, it doesn't matter. The message is always the same. God loves us. We are his children, and we are to live this blessed life, do unto others as we would do unto you. All right, guys, stay blessed. Love you guys. See you next week. And don't forget, next week's episode is going to be Don't Fuck with Cats. This is going to be an absolutely extremely crazy animal story. So if you guys love animals, if you guys love cats, I forewarn you on next week's episode, but it's going to be so good. Love you guys. Stay blessed.